Hi, this is Keith Nakasone, the Deputy Assistant Commissioner for the IT category Acquisition Operations. Today, we would like to speak to you about artificial intelligence in federal procurement. And as we go through this discussion, we wanted to talk about riding the digital wave of transformation. And really, what that means is we are speaking from the voice of uh, the change that's going to occur in the future and actually leveraging artificial intelligence in a way that to help us perform our jobs better, more efficiently, and more effectively by letting the artificial intelligence do more of the low-level task type of work that we have in an environment where the human capital can focus more on the complex type of work that we have within the business lines, such as acquisitions. So as we go through this step-by-step process, leveraging artificial intelligence will be a journey. And it's not something that will happen overnight. It will take some time to get the people trained, raising the awareness of how the emerging technology can be used in the future of acquisitions and beyond. So as we go through the understanding of artificial intelligence, there's going to be a series of engagements that will have to happen in and around artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning, et cetera. And as we learn more about how we can leverage the artificial intelligence moving forward, we would be better suited to handle the up and coming emerging technologies and the tools that will be used in the IT realm. So as we talked about, as we go through the journey, you'll start to see kind of like a roadmap. And what we have developed within GSA is just that. So we're going to take a step-by-step AI journey through this process to help better understand and raise the awareness of what we're trying to accomplish and how we can be successful together in supporting the agencies in their efforts on leveraging artificial intelligence. So let's begin with the community of practice. The GSA stood up a team within GSA to bring agencies together so that we would be able to understand how the agencies are applying artificial intelligence within their agency. And many of the agencies have already taken some steps and have run some proof of concepts and some pilots on how it may be used within the different business lines. Then we have the Center of Excellence that is actually helping with consulting and advisory support. It's a set of individuals augmented with contract resources to help better situate the agencies so that they will be able to understand how to adopt it and use it moving forward. And this is where they can identify some areas where they potentially need additional assistance, identifying skill gaps, identifying areas where they would need some help in order to inject the new technology within an agency. And then we have the IT category. And what we're doing within the information technology category is we're actually building out the contract vehicles to support the production and scale within the different business lines to help contracting officers negotiate contracts as well as put better solutions together moving forward. So if we can adopt best practices by learning through the lessons learned that the agencies have already undertaken, we would be able to support by building some best practices into the acquisition solutions in the government-wide acquisition contracts as well as the IT schedule. So the first thing we do is collaboration, and understanding the agency's needs is key and is very important in moving forward as we continue down the road and the journey. really, because what we're trying to do is we want to understand how the AI will enable the agency to be more efficient and effective in serving the taxpayer, as well as helping the internal organization be more efficient with their time, with their resources, and being more effective in moving forward. And when we talk about meaningful discussions with CXOs, it's really getting people together so we can understand the frame of reference between the the CIOs and the chief financial officers and the acquisition officers, so that when we have these discussions, we know how to plan, we know how to execute, and sharing of that information and critical milestones as we develop the strategy in moving forward. We would be better positioned and be much more successful if we have executive sponsorship at the very top levels of an agency to move us in the right direction. And by collaborating with the different CXOs, we would be able to understand the constraints that we may have in moving forward through this collaboration process. So let's talk a little bit about data strategy. One of the things that AI and machine learning depends on is the data governance. We have to ensure that we have someone overseeing, like the chief data officer, overseeing the architecture and the management, and we have the right set of tools so that we have the natural language processing, and we create data sets and models that will be able to be used to with the emerging technology. And that is key when we leverage the future tool sets. Data is going to be very important for us to move forward in leveraging the AI tools that are coming about. So as we go through this process, we're beginning the journey with the digital workforce transformation. And what we're doing is we have to look inwardly to the agencies, and we have to see and assess the workforce. We have to identify who is ready for it. Do we have the right skill sets, the right competencies? And if we don't, then from the assessment, we have to figure out a training and development plan so that we would be able to raise that situational awareness, learn how to use the different tools, or actually understand the different tools, and also how we can apply it within the business realm. So as we go through this process, it's going to be a continuous improvement. It's going to require upskilling and reskilling of the workforce so that as we leverage the AI and machine learning technology, we would be able to retrain the workforce to take on a different role in the space they play. For example, in acquisitions, let's just say that we have a number of staff reviewing enterprise licensing agreements for the contracts. And if we leverage AI to do some of that manual review process and look for key terms and understand the key terms that do not comply with the federal acquisition regulations, and we take numbers maybe days and weeks to do that review and negotiate. And if we have the automated tools that help us identify those toxic terms and conditions, we may be able to reuse that labor somewhere else within the acquisition process to better accelerate the process, to focus on things that need attention, to potentially do more in the realm of acquisition reform as we relieve some of the lower level tasks that can be done by the machine. So as we go through this process, when you develop your team, you're going to need a set of individuals. And this is not this is some of the key areas that we're looking at. We talked about how data is going to become very important. So somebody like a data scientist that knows how and understands the data and how the data is going to be used. In addition to that, somebody who understands the business. We may need some functional subject matter experts depending on the area. It could be in procurement, financial, could be in logistics, etc. We just need to find those business experts that know the business well, so that we would be able to build the AI and machine learning in the way that it will be successful. The other thing is the IT specialists. We need the programmers and the coders to really understand the business, but also how to inject the use of AI and ML. And so as we go through again, I talked about the functional subject matter experts and the business analysts working together to figure out the business processes with the functional requirements as well. As we go through that process, these are going to be key to ensure that we get it right. And so we definitely need those people to move the AI ML forward. And when we talk about the IT acquisition procurement subject matter expert, it's really the person who puts the contract together, that really understands how to create and construct a procurement so we can make go, no-go decisions in the process. As I stated up front, this is going to be a journey, so it's going to require some what we call go and no-go decisions. For example, if we're going down a path and we're doing agile sprints, if you will, through the IT methodology, there may be some diversions we need to take. We may make decisions that we don't proceed on, a potential part of the business, and we refocus and channel the efforts down another road. And so when we start developing the team makeup, we really want to make sure that everybody is level set in a way that everybody's operating to the same beat of the drum, if you will. And then when we talk about training workshops and when we build the capabilities into our environment, adopting the agile methodology is going to be key, because this is not going to be the one and done type of effort. This is going to be a journey where it's going to be done in phases, and it's going to take time. And it's just like building blocks, where there's going to be some things that we're going to do over a period of time. As we deploy, we're going to learn from it, and we can modify, change, and evolve over a period of time. And this is going to be key in having that workforce adopt that mentality of being able to work and deliver in phases, rather than trying to deliver a total solution up front. Then we talk about change management, the soft skills. This is more of the change management that's going to be involved, where when you make changes to the work environment, or when you make changes to the business processes, your staff needs to be able to refocus their time on areas where you may need them to redirect, if you will, in developing your workforce. For example, when we talk about, let's say you've been trained to do step 1 through step 100, and you've been doing the process over and over and over for a period of years, and you inject a technology that may now change the way you do business, or maybe it's re-engineered in a way that you're only doing steps 1 through 15 and the rest is done through automation. You're going to have to work through that process. And so having those change management skills and having that coaching ability to ensure success is going to be key when you're adopting AI and ML within the environment. And understanding how from how you deploy and how you're going to leverage artificial intelligence is going to be part of that business strategy. So as you go through the process, it's getting the team involved very early on, so everybody understands, what the problem is, why you're doing it, how you're going to do it, when you're going to release things, etc. So, it's really that active, high-level engagement with everybody and with the workforce, so that they understand where you're moving and how you're moving, and how you're going to adopt it over time. This will gain traction. Not only that, it will help lay down the foundation of that overall strategy, so everybody understands what's going on. Now, when we talk about acquisition training, the acquisition workforce has been trained to develop. So let's say that they've been trained to deliver on, your basic commodity type of procurements. In delivering AI and ML, it becomes a little bit more complex. The building of the requirements, the statutory requirements that come with, you're going to have that ability to have some flexibility in your contract vehicles. So training the acquisition workforce to develop these flexible contracts is going to be key to success on how to build out a contract so that you can do things in phases, how you would be able to move things or structure the contract where you have some flexibility in making these go, no-go decisions as you go through a build leveraging AI and ML. And so the next step we talk about is use cases. So as we go through this process, use cases are going to be key, because what we found is when you leverage certain themes in a business line, such as acquisitions or financials, you'll be able to adopt things if it's in the same environment. Let's just say that when you process an application for could be, let's just say, for driver's license, or when you process an application for a bank loan, etc. Some of the processes are repetitive. And as we develop best practices and we understand that mission requirements, we would be able to build in some things that could be pretty much ready to go outside of the from right outside of the gate. So let's just say that there's a commercial off-the-shelf item that we would be able to adopt. We would be able to move that and accelerate the procurement process a lot quicker if the baseline is exactly the same from agency to agency to agency. So if we were to be able to create templates, create acquisition vehicles, and other things that would help accelerate the process, we would be better suited in the success of adopting a government-wide solution. And so this is key as we go through the process and we develop use cases, which turns into contracts downstream. And so we would be able to learn how to apply the different contract types in each of the different scenarios by leveraging use cases. So when we talk about procurement solutions and when we talk about the types of contracts we're going to use, the first thing we always look at is how do we leverage commercial off-the-shelf tools. There's a lot of things that have been done by the private sector already where they're leveraging AI and ML in their environment. And if there's a few configuration changes we could do and still apply it within the government realm, we would be able to move a lot quicker. And so leveraging commercial off the shelf is always something that we want to consider as we look at AI and ML. Adopting COTS with some of the configuration changes, that means that we don't have to do a heavy lift on, or for that matter, no code change, where we would be able to just use things right out of the box. That is something that we would like to do to move us quicker with the technology. But also when we talk about transitions and when we talk about contract life, this will also help in when you have to transition out of a contract and move into another contract. Because if the more customization goes on in this effort, the more complex it becomes and the more difficult it becomes to move if you start to customize solutions downstream. So when we talk about procurement solutions based on small, medium, and large agency, it's not the one size fits all. We really have to understand the size and scope of the agency when we develop these solution sets, because what we develop for a large agency may not work for a small agency. And so we have to understand, the capability and the workforce at large as well. So when we go into, there's some key checklist items that we're going to have to focus on so that we would be able to structure the procurement solutions that will be best suited for the agency size and as I stated before, the workforce. And then we talk about when to use a statement of objectives, a statement of work, or a performance work statement. So let's just say that we're taking on an effort where we don't even know where to begin, or we don't know where to start, and there's a huge learning curve that we have to overcome, where we only know our desired end state, or what does success look like. You might be better off just doing a SOO, a statement of objectives, because what you're doing is you're listing out what you want to accomplish and what does success look like, but you let the contractors help develop a solution set for you downstream. The other thing is that if you're at the other spectrum, if you're at the closer to the maturity where you have everything defined, everything's working great, everything's running well, and 99% of the solution, and exactly what you need, a statement of work might work for you. And so you have to be able to figure out, by the documentation, where you fit in your procurement process and what you're comfortable with. And there's pros and cons with using all the different specifications, if you will, in a contract. So, or I should say, contract requirements. So when you go through the process, that's why we recommend that if you're not sure which way to go, come through the community of practice, as well as potentially leveraging the Center of Excellence work groups to help lead you down that direction. And then developing independent government estimates. This becomes a little bit tricky. This again needs to be done well from the standpoint of where the best practices can be leveraged. So if some of the forward-leaning agencies that have actually developed some of these government estimates, they may already have captured some of the baselines that you could potentially use instead of trying to recreate it or build it yourself. There's a lot of information that can be helpful to guide you through that process. And so we recommend that you touch base with people like from the different agencies that have already adopted or are actually further down the road, that they can help it with this process. And then when you procure through OEMs, resellers, system integrators, of course, they have different pros and cons. For example, if you're buying through the reseller program and you know exactly what you want, or you've tested the capability, and you know exactly what tools you can use, and you have all the resources in-house, homegrown, where they understand AI, they understand the machine learning, they understand everything in and around the agency's requirements. You may be suited to just buy the tool and be able to develop and run with it. You may need additional support through the system integrator to help you with that process. So there's different ways you can apply and how to use it, how to use the tool, the different AI ML solutions, and that's also based on your ability within your organization, as well as understanding how to apply it within your business lines. So as you go through this process, identifying how you're going to acquire and how you're going to develop and how you're going to sustain is going to be key when you're developing your business strategy. So let's talk about some of the procurement challenges that you may run into. There's a number of companies that are emerging that may not understand the federal acquisition regulations at large, and they may have some commercial terms and conditions that are considered toxic, meaning that are not acceptable for a government contract. And so as you go through that process, identifying and working with an experienced acquisition staff is going to be key to ensure that you do not accept any of those toxic terms and conditions when you're negotiating AI ML contracts. And then when we talk about data rights, this is where we have to have specific language, not only relying on the federal acquisition regulation and the FAR clauses, but we also have to have contract language developed to ensure and additional policies to ensure that that the government doesn't lose its ability to retain the data rights and retain the PII or the private information that's from a government perspective held at the highest level from a confidential perspective. So we definitely have to take data rights seriously, and we have to ensure that we have the proper terms and conditions laid out in a contract so that there is no question at the end of any term of a contract who owns it, and how do we ensure that we retain it and it's not used in other ways. Then we talk about government versus industry processes. When we look at the process within government and industry, we definitely have to look at the nuances between private and public. And so as we go through this situation, we want to maximize buying like the commercial, buying like the private sector, but there are nuances that we have to consider as we go through this process. So this is where we can adopt some best practices moving forward in sharing of that information through the community of practice, where we would be able to identify the different processes between government and the private sector. Then when we talk about intellectual property and algorithms, this is where, again, just similar to data rights, we have to ensure that we document and we have the right contract language in the embedded within the terms and conditions to ensure that we know who owns what at the end of a contract term, which is going to be important when you're working with AI and ML. And when we talk about total cost of ownership, this is where things will evolve. Again, as I stated up front, it's going to be a journey. You may not be able to identify everything up front, and you're going to build into it. It's the agile process in developing your IT tools in your environment. And as you go through this process, you'll be able to identify things over a period of time, meaning the cost elements that lead up to your total cost of ownership. This is where documentation is key to the success of demonstrating efficiencies and effectiveness through the process. And so like any other enterprise architecture or IT modernization effort, what you want to do is ensure that you have and all your cost elements identified as you go through the journey of building into your or leveraging your emerging technology efforts. Again, continuous improvement. This is where we will continuously learn, and as we learn, we will improve. Meaning that as we find additional ways to accelerate the procurement process, leverage best practices, we would create templates and playbooks so that we would be able to deploy AI, ML a lot quicker moving forward. And again, I already talked about your transition language within contracts. This is going to be another thing that we want to be consistent about when we work from agency to agency. And if we can develop a similar language or boilerplate language to be consistent in transitions, this will definitely help the industry base or the vendors to understand how we will move from contract to contract in that process within the acquisition guidelines, if you will. When we talk about pricing structures, we want to definitely also build some pricing tools and structures that we can use so that we can replicate things a lot quicker and similar in nature when we were talking about AI and ML. And then when we talk about statutory requirements, so over time as we evolve, some of the statutory requirements will change, and we will have to accommodate and make those changes as new requirements come about. So we have to be ready for that as well. So that, like any other, acquisition is never stagnant. It will always change. So we have to be flexible and agile in how we leverage AI and ML going forward. And as we learn through that process, we may be able to write additional or address acquisition regulations downstream on what needs to change and how it should change. Ethics is a big issue. What you'll see in some of the companies, they're very transparent about their ethics with leveraging AI and ML. They will actually post it out on the web. Some companies have actually identified their ethics principles when using AI on their websites. Some have not. It's a business decision on each company and that's something that we should consider as we move forward to see whether or not, or how mature they are in their process, how they're applying ethics, how they are using it, etc. So these are some of the things that we would take a look at as well to identify if they're to address any kind of ethical concerns or risks, if you will, in applying or using any of the commercial off-the-shelf products. Same goes with biases. The same applies to ethics. When we look at that, we want to know, what kind of principles they're applying, what are they using, how are they using it, what kind of governance do they have over it, et cetera, to address potential biases. So that's another key thing that we look at. And then when we talk about security, this is another thing that we have to ensure, with the uptick in cybersecurity requirements and what we're doing with the supply chain, as we're taking a different look at how we can ensure that security is addressed within all of our IT tools, not just AI and ML, but IT as a whole. We cannot forget about security when we are adopting emerging technologies in our environment. So key takeaways, again, the one of the most important things that we can do here is agency engagements. As we look at the agencies and how they are adopting and applying emerging technologies, it's going to be key on how we continue that open collaboration between each agency, so that we would be able to extract the best practices, identify themes that we're seeing, solve problems together, solve challenges together, and having that collaboration with the different agencies is going to be key, especially from the small, medium, and large perspective. We would be able to build and start looking at procurement solutions in a different manner, so that we can meet the different types of agencies' needs. And then when we look at business strategy, if we can adopt some common, like I said about a playbook, we would be able to look at business strategy and look at how the lines of businesses can be developed, so that we can work towards that whole of government approach, and applying some of the methodologies and tools in the same direction, so that we can start leveraging each other within the different agencies to become and drive to that better buying power and standardization across government, et cetera. So business strategy is going to be key moving forward as well. And when we talk about staying engaged, this is where, I'm not just talking about the acquisition professionals, but I'm looking at more of that broader community, the financial types, the procurement types, and logistics, et cetera. Everybody needs to be engaged with the process, so that we would be able to understand the ecosystem with leveraging AI. And this is where sharing of information, collaborating, if we can do anything to help accelerate the process, this is where GSA will help build out some of that capability and potentially develop those acquisition solutions, so that we can make this a better way to apply or buy AI ML solutions. And then when we talk about internal digital workforce, we focusing on the workforce and developing the capabilities in-house, and also doing the upskill, reskill is going to be important as we move forward. And so as we train the ecosystem, as we train the acquisition workforce on how to establish contracts, but more than that, how to understand what we're trying to accomplish through the business lines, is going to be key to the success of leveraging emerging technologies. So stay tuned, stay engaged. This is one thing that will be a journey as we move forward within IT modernization. And so by us communicating, collaborating on a consistent basis will help us to learn and evolve over time. There's going to be a whole addition to sharing of this information, and we're going to leverage the acquisition gateway. We're going to be posting things to GSA Interact, and we're also going to have our teams set up so that you know exactly how to navigate through our portfolio to identify where AI ML lives within each of the subcategories, because we definitely know that there is no one size fits all, and there's going to be different iterations. There's going to be different tools available for use. So as we go through this process, we will be sharing that information out through the links that we have here.